E360 TV proudly presents Messages of Inspirational Stories, broadcasting and live streaming to millions of devices around the world, including Roku, and live streaming to Facebook Live. Also on Amazon Fire TV and to Twitch. Also Android TV and Periscope. Broadcasting to Apple TV and YouTube Live. Proudly brought to you by our host, Donna Guinois, producer and host, Michaela Vidal, host and administrator, and Jim Grant, producer and host. Proudly brought to you by the 6minutewebinar.com.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to week 2 of Old World Things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We had so much fun last week because there's so much doom and gloom and nonsense going on in the world today. Donna and I, we voted on, we were unanimous in that vote to carry on the old sayings because it brings a lot of good infotainment to folks. Next week, we're going to go all the way back in history to the Roaring 20s.
That's going to be amazing.
Because right after the beginning of this year, Donna and I, we put on a theme week of, starting a New Year's revolution instead of a resolution.
Right.
And we anchored that around because the timing was perfect. Because back during the turn of the 20th century, 1917, I'm trying to think, 1914 when World War I started, officially started. When we got involved with it, when I say we, United States, it was on until 1917. Then they had the Spanish flu, which took out a whole multitude of people.
I believe it was 50 million people.
Yeah. I mean, that thing was spooky, scary. They didn't have masks. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. I mean, all they had was fear, worry, and prayer.
Right.
That's basically it. And those people, ladies and gentlemen, at that time, they got sick and tired of the doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I'm tired of this surviving. We want to thrive.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing around the world today, isn't it, Donna? People are sick and tired of surviving. They want to thrive.
It is. And, the interesting thing, and one of the reasons that Jim and I wanted to bring back and to really kind of go into some depth about the Roaring 20s is because, you guys, history repeats itself.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It sure does.
History repeats itself. After the Great Depression and the Roaring 20s came, more millionaires were made at that time for a long, long time than any other time in history, except now after this pandemic. If my memory serves me correct on doing my reading, there are more millionaires came up now after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes. And we had Marty Haggard on our show. We're going to be doing a lot more things with our friend Marty Haggard. When I mention the name Marty Haggard, Donna just starts smiling.
I know.
Yeah, because he's just a buddy of ours.
He is just the salt of the earth, folks. Yeah. I'm telling you.
Even though Merle, his dad, lost his father at the age of 9. But prior to that, during the Depression, every year his father, because I forget what he was in, but anyway, he was able to buy a new car every single new year. And they were very well to do.
Right.
Like Marty says, we're the ones that were poor. He thought all milk was powdered, didn't he?
Right. Oh, gosh, I remember those days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mom used to make powdered milk and then mix it half and half with regular milk and shake it up real good. Well, you did what you had to do, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, the Roaring 20s was a time when people just wanted to, just basically thrive, and they wanted
Right.
to live in the abundance. They were sick and tired of the doom and gloom, and that's what people are around the world today. We hear of all the things going on that we can't do anything about, but we can adjust our attitude,
Mhm.
and we can adjust our altitude, and we can adjust our outcome in life as far as living in abundance, because that's a promise from the creator of the universe. Nobody can take that from you. You can
Right.
give it up if you want to, but not even a bandit can break in your house and take that from you. That's how
Absolutely.
precious of a gift that is.
Absolutely. So, with week two starting of Old World sayings, I think I'd like to start off by saying, do you know where the term God bless you,
Hmm. No, I
right?
don't.
Okay. And what it means. So, this is kind of fun. So, I've read two different things, and my husband had told me another one. So, I'll give y'all all three of them.
And
So,
you can
one
roll
of
your own.
the so one of the symptoms of the plague was coughing and sneezing, and it is believed that Pope Gregory the First, to Gregory the Great, suggested saying "God bless you" after a person sneezed, in hopes that this prayer would protect them from an otherwise uncertain death. The expression may have also been originated from superstition.
Hmm.
Now, there's another one that it just means an expression of good wishes or on parting, good night and God bless. Now, my husband told me that he had heard or read that when people sneeze, that it was
Hmm.
originally because obvious superstition believed that you were vulnerable to letting the devil in.
Yeah. Or you were letting out an evil spirit. I've heard that one too.
Right,
I have.
right.
Yeah.
So I
And
thought that one was kind of interesting.
well, it's really interesting when you think about that. If you got a dog or something like that, and you're petting your dog and your dog sneezes on you, go, "Oh, poor baby, what's the matter, buddy?" But you let a human sneeze on you, what's the matter with you, you varmint? I mean, so you can easily understand why they thought that was an evil spirit back in the old days, But
Right.
now they do is just give you a bad case of whatever they got. But
Nice,
yeah,
Jim.
yeah. I mean, that's just but if a little dog sneezes on you, I mean, if Jake sneezes on you, you're going, "Oh my goodness, poor boy," whatever.
Yeah, you got the sneezies, buddy.
Yeah. And of course, I know he wouldn't, but if Edgy sneezed on you, go like, "What is wrong with you? Don't you know what a Kleenex is?
Right.
Can't you put your hand over your nose or mouth or whatever?"
I
Oh
love it.
goodness. I mean, we have love for our animals and zero tolerance for humans when it comes to sneezing. And I'm like that too. I'll confess. Point that thing the other way.
Well, what about the term yellow belly, Jim?
Ooh, I know what that means.
Right. So
I
yellow
think, but tell
belly,
me.
yellow belly, of course, means that it's an insult and
Oh yeah.
indicating that the person's a coward.
Oh yeah.
But the term yellow belly is an American term, but began life in England in the late 18th century
Hmm.
as a mild derogatory nickname. A provincial glossary with a collection of local proverbs and popular superstitions. 1787 lists yellow bellies. This is an appellation given to persons born in the fens who, it is jocularly said, have yellow belly like they're eels.
Oh. Hmm.
Okay.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So how are all you yellow-bellied sapsuckers out there?
Right.
It reminds me of old Andy
Do you know
Griffith
what a
and
yellow
Barney.
belly sapsucker is?
It's supposed to be a bird, ain't it?
It is a woodpecker.
A woodpecker, huh?
Mhm.
I've
Yep.
heard that. I didn't know that, but I've heard that, and I'll tell you where it came from. It came from the Andy Griffith Show when Barney was talking about that sounds like a yellow-bellied sapsucker or something like
Yeah,
that.
I don't know where I heard it of, honestly, but I know
Uh-huh.
that that is a common little saying that comes out of my mouth.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it sounds horrible. Like it
Oh, I
sounds like
know it.
you're being super, super mean. And,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, if you're saying it to somebody, you're just calling them a bird.
Yeah. You a woodpecker, you.
Right? I
I,
love it.
yeah. One of the sayings that I've heard is, when someone says off the record, what does that
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah. We know what it means that they're going to say something, but they want it to not be repeated or shared anywhere else. It's kind of like telling you a secret. Okay, I'll talk to you off the record, but you can't print this. And that's an American phrase. It was first attributed to President Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, who was recorded in the Daily Times and News saying he was going to talk off the record. And that is, what was mighty nice to be able to talk off the record for a change, that he had hoped he'd be able to talk off the record in the future because he wanted to share some information with the person interviewing him, but he didn't want, John Q. Public and Mary Q. Public to know about it. So that's where that phrase comes from. That's where it gets its uh, start or origin from.
How interesting is
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
How interesting is that? Well, what
yeah.
about this one? Jim, I know you've heard it. Your name is Mud.
Oh, yeah. I know what it means too.
So, I think there's two meanings. So it, according to what I'm reading,
Mhm.
says that you're unpopular. But how I grew up, and I'm sure how you grew up, Jim, when your name is Mud, it means you did something wrong. Your name's no good
Oh,
anyway,
yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's kind of interesting here. This says that this is the origin. In May of 2010, BP tried to cap an oil spill off the Gulf of Mexico by
Right. I remember
plugging the
that.
leak with heavy mud,
Hmm.
right? Had it worked, it might have given them some hopes of limiting the damage or the reputation. As it didn't, the BP brand name is more likely than most mud. Okay, but it goes on to say that uh, BP CEO Tony Hayward has joined another villain of the collective American psyche, Dr. Samuel Mudd, who is widely revealed for his part in the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Dr. Mudd gave medical help to John Wilkes Booth, who broke his leg after escaping shooting
Hmm.
Lincoln in 1865.
Right.
Mudd was convicted of being Booth's co-conspirator,
Hmm.
although the evidence was against him was, ambiguous and circumstantial. But many historians argue that he was innocent of any murderous intent.
Oh,
He has
yeah.
since been, of course, he was pardoned, all of that. So that's kind of where your name Mudd also came from.
Yes.
A slang term in the Dictionary of the Turf of 1823.
Yeah, because it's kind of an interesting story about that. I've read up on that a little bit over the years, and it's been several years since I've read about it, so my memory may not be as precise as I'd like for it to be. But the doctor was totally innocent. He was simply a doctor. He got a knock at the door. A guy was wounded, or not wounded, but had a broken leg or
Leg.
whatever. And he just treated him like a doctor would. And he
Right.
just got caught up in the process.
Right. He kind of got caught, swept up in the whole thing.
Yes, he did, because it was an emotional roller coaster. They were out to hang somebody.
Hmm.
And one of the eyewitnesses who knew John Wilkes Booth saw the person that was supposedly labeled as John Wilkes Booth that was in the barn that got gunned down. And he said, "This man is not Booth."
I'll be darned.
He said Booth was, I forget the sizes and all, but anyway, Booth was a different size than the man there. And the man had red hair and Booth didn't, or whatever. Booth had dark hair and the man
Hmm.
had red hair and things like this. And then there was a guy here in Texas who was on his deathbed who, and I'm trying to remember his name, it's Saint Clair or something like that, Saint something. I don't remember, so I apologize for that. But anyway, he was on his deathbed. He confessed he was John Wilkes Booth, and the guy didn't believe him, and he showed him his ankle. He had the same type of scars and the same type of marks that the real life John Wilkes Booth had that everybody knew. And he confessed to a life of crime, or not to the life of crime. He confessed to the assassination and wanted to, die with a clear conscience. Then he got better. But he was a bartender here in Texas. So there has been that. A lot of people say that's a conspiracy theory or a theory or whatever. But you know what? It's kind of hard for a person to be the same height, have the same color hair. Of course, it's gray in then, but the same scars and the same identifying marks. That's pretty hard to pull off. It really is.
Especially back then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Especially back then. Well, what one do you have for us?
Donna, you are a sight for sore eyes. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, just a time or two.
Yeah. Jonathan Swift, the author of Gulliver's Travels, he is credited with first using this phrase in his collection of genteel and ingenious conversation in 1738 when he, with the line he wrote, he says, "The sight of you is good for sore eyes." That's where that saying came from. That's what he meant. So if the sight of someone is good for sore eyes, that's a very positive thing, number one. Number two, it means that they have a presence that the person's been longing to see.
Right. Quite the compliment.
Yes, definitely quite the compliment. But that's where the sight for sore eyes came from. We kind of knew what it meant, and that made sense, but the origin of where it came from.
Right.
Yeah. And what's interesting about some of these origins and their meanings, where they came from, is that I have a lot of sayings that, people do not normally hear, or the average person hasn't heard. But one of those sayings, I'm not saying it would, don't misunderstand, but one of those sayings could get wind and someone could pass it along, and it could become a common saying, because some of these original sayings we're going over, that's exactly how they got started.
Right, right.
I mean, like one of Boone Pickens' sayings, he says, the trouble with people, especially young guys, he says they'll aim, squeeze the trigger, fire. You might hit the bullseye. At least you'll know where you're at. But they'll aim, and not pull the trigger. And if someone told you that when they ask you, if you ask about someone, it's, well, they'll aim, and aim, but they won't pull the trigger. What would that tell you?
Right. Yeah. Then, oh dear.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how about quid pro quo?
Okay.
Most of us have heard that. That's not a new saying.
Nope.
And it really means giving something given in return for something of equivalent value. It's it for a tat. But here's where the origin is: a Latin term meaning something for something, or this for that. The idea is more commonly expressed in English as one good turn deserves another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been used in the English-speaking world since the 16th century. An early example of it is in print is found in Lytle Treasure, Manner and Form of Confession, 1535.
Wow. Right?
That goes back a day or two.
Yeah. And when you said tit for tat, that reminded me of course, we know it means this for that, but it also reminds me of that old saying, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard that many times in my life,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's see here. You want me to pick one, or you want to go on?
You pick one.
Okay. A stone's throw. You ever heard something just, it's a stone's throw away or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
It definitely means a short distance, okay? It's a variation of a stone's cast, first used in the early editions of the Bible, but it fell out of use when writer John Arbuthnot revived it in the History of John Bull in 1712. So it means a stone's throw, a very short distance, And I researched that to see how many feet it would be or if there's any estimate, and there really isn't. There really isn't any type of an official, measurement. But it's just kind of like saying, how far is something? Well, it's just a skip, holler, and a skip, holler, and a jump away, or whatever. Skip, jump, and holler. What's that phrase now?
Well, now you're going to have me confused.
You see, we freelance this show here because that's the way we enjoy doing it.
Yeah, skip, jump, and a holler.
Yeah, skip, jump, and
Skip,
holler
jump,
away.
and a holler.
Yeah, and that's a expression used back in the. I associate that phrase being used with the Appalachian people, the mountain people, because that was a lot of verbiage I heard them use. That when I heard it, that's mainly where it came from.
Interesting.
Donna sitting over there deep. She's going back to the 12th century or something.
I'm trying to find some good ones that we haven't talked about.
Oh, we've talked about it. Go ahead.
Right? Like there are so many, but how about this one? You're the laughingstock, Jim.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome, buddy. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. So it means a figure or object of ridicule and laughter. But the origin is, it's a hyphenated word, but it's moderately old, and there are at least 2 citations of it dating back to the 16th century. John Frith's and other broke against Rastal, 1533. Abate I be reputed a laughing stock in this world. And Sir Philip Sidney's An Apology for Poetry in 1533. Poetry is fallen to be the laughing stock of children. So the age and phrase may be the reason that it is often linked with the practice of putting people into stocks as a punishment.
Right.
Stocks were a mean of punishment in use at that time when the phrase was coined. Of course, that they were, tortured and or ridiculed. So I know you've talked about that one a little bit on the how that they were tortured, which is really quite brutal. But that's
also,
kind of how that came around.
Yeah, when they put them in the stocks with their hands in their head through there, I mean, they look foolish.
Right.
And people would laugh at them. I mean, you can imagine teenagers, teenagers as seen back then as they are now, and they probably throw apples or something at them, I mean, it's just, it was a very degrading type of punishment.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. It absolutely was.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Have you ever heard the old saying, Donna, that distance makes the heart grow fonder?
Oh, yeah.
That's an oldie and a goodie, too. It makes it, the original phrase was absence makes the heart grow fonder. And it goes all the way back to a Roman poet by the name of Sextus Propertus and Egelus, I guess you pronounce his last name. It was always meant when his poems was to show when the lovers were apart, how strong their love flowed to be with one another. And in 1832, the modern variant of the phrase was coined by a Miss Strickland in the Pocket Magazine of Classic and Polite Literature. And it's been changed to distance makes the heart grow fonder. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I know you've heard of this, and my guess is you've probably used it once or twice. Easy peasy.
Oh.
Right?
I've heard Don McGrath say that 2,900 times at least.
Right? And easy peasy lemon squeezy, right?
Yeah.
So
nice and easy.
Yeah, easy peasy is easy and simple, and was mostly used by children. But the origin is kind of interesting. The expression easy peasy appears to be American in origin. At least the first example of it that was found, a very simple meaning, is from the Cincinnati Enquirer, January 1953. There's a brief travelogue of highlights of a jet trip from London to Cairo in about 3 hours, a distance requiring days and days by ground travel. The flight is such an easy peasy affair for the air travelers. They seem to be motionless in a fantastic and lovely sun drenched cloudland.
Hmm. That's
Interesting.
amazing. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
Didn't
We,
apparently though it didn't really catch on until 1970s, Jim.
yeah, I can believe that because of we like those rhyming type of phrases and stuff.
Right. They're easy to remember.
Yeah, yeah,
Easy to remember.
yeah. And a lot of things that you hear down from your parents and all that. I mean, back before the printed Gutenberg invented the printing press, and back then things were recorded on scrolls and stuff. But the average person, the way they passed down family history, the way they passed down
Hmm.
stories and stuff, was the use of parables.
Right.
And parables are very effective. In fact, Jesus used parables in teaching his followers.
Oh,
And the
absolutely.
and the thing about parables is that these old sayings, these are also parables, because think about how many times you've used them, and how many times your parents have said them to you to illustrate a crystal clear point, something that has some stickability in the mind. That's the
Absolutely.
that's the power of a parable, and that's why it was used.
And it was in my house, and I know in my parents' home, it was just common everyday saying.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Just,
sure,
just like, yeah, right over there. I mean, it
yeah,
was just, just right in there.
yeah. You make your bed hard, you're gonna lay in it, you
Right.
know, and we all knew what that meant. That was a parable. It's also a principle. Parables and principles run parallel with each other.
Right.
And I was going to share one here with you, Donna. Did you ever hear the phrase that something didn't pass the acid test?
Yep.
Okay. Do you know where that got its phrase from, or where it started?
No.
Okay, it came about during the California gold rush days back in the 19th century, when prospectors and dealers would use acid to distinguish gold from base metal. If the metal
Uh,
dissolved in a mixture of hydrochloric acid and nitric acid, it was real. And so that would pass the acid test. And that would,
Interesting.
yeah, that way, people got their fair shake on both sides of the street.
Interesting.
And Donna,
Interesting.
did you know an apple a day will keep the doctor away?
I've heard
Have,
that.
have you? I have too. And there's a lot of truth in that because of the great benefits of apples.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what this catchy rhyme is a proverb from is Pembrokeshire or Devon. The earliest recording of this phrase is 1866. It states, "Eat an apple on going to bed, and you'll keep the doctor from earning his bread." Oh my goodness!
I
No,
love it.
no, no one, no harm out there, or nothing, about doctors or anything. But that's where it came from,
Right.
and it's from. But 1913, I should say, Elizabeth Wright recorded this phrase from the latter. Ada happy Avon grade. I don't know how this has got to be in French or something. But anyway, if you eat an apple a day, you will keep the doctor away. That's where it comes down. And it started in 1866. Eat an apple on going to bed, and you'll keep your doctor from earning his bread. That was
That's
the
funny.
original statement. Yeah.
That's funny. Well,
Oh,
what about Jim? That's neither here nor there.
I don't care.
So obviously, it means of no consequence, one way or
Right.
the other. But geez, this goes back the origins, folks, to the 16th century. And a phrase is often wrongly
Hmm.
attributed to William Shakespeare. This is
Really?
the first use of it in print, that this, on this website that they found, is in an author, Arthur Golding's translations of the sermons of J. Calvin upon uh, Deuteronomy in
Hmm.
1583.
Hmm.
True it is that our so doing is neither here nor there, as they say, in respect of God. So Shakespeare did use that phrase, neither here nor there, but later in Othello in 1616. And then, of course, there's hither and yon, right?
Yeah.
That's an old Southern saying. Hither and yon.
It certainly is, yeah.
So it just means here and there, to this place or that place. So, but it's an old English expression, meaning, of course, here, there, to or fro. But it's not exactly, it wasn't widely used since the middle of the 20th century. Interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, in a negative sense, some guys have described married life as being a ball and chain. Not me now.
No.
You know, I haven't, because if I said that, everybody would know that I was an idiot by knowing Evelyn. To be honest. Now, this rather crude description of a wife refers to the ball and chain that was originally strapped to a prisoner's leg in the American and British prisons in the early 19th century. And of course, obviously, the reason why they had a ball and chain strapped to them was because prison space was very limited, and it'd be kind of hard to run with a steel ball strapped to your ankle, and it'd look a little funny going down the street, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and then if it whacked your other leg, it'd really hurt.
That's kind of like I remember one time on Hogan's Heroes, it was a comedy back in the 60s for you young pups out there. And they were talking about, escaping, the prisoners. And he said, well, just run down the street. And he says, Hogan says, don't you think it'll look a little funny with 5 guys chained together with their ankles chained together running down the street?
What?
That'd be kind of like, okay, that would not be hard to figure out. It really wouldn't.
No.
But that's where the ball and chain came from.
Yeah, that could be that could be a darn issue.
Yeah, and while you're looking up one there, let me just go over this one here. Any job doing is worth doing well.
Right.
My goodness. We've heard that a lot, hadn't we?
Oh, yeah. If you're going to do it right, Donna.
Yeah, that's right. If you're going to do it, at least do it right. Any job worth doing is worth doing well. It's an old saying meaning that put 100% effort in everything that you do. Your mental approach to your job dictates the outcome that you'll receive. If half of your day consists of that job, do yourself a favor and do the work in the best possible way you can. And when I tell people that in one of my coaching classes that if you got a task that you're going to clean out the garage, okay, we know that's going to be a chore. And it's going to be, and if you're like me, how do you separate your trash from your treasures? Because as soon as you throw something out, even though it's been sitting there for 10 years collecting dust, but if you throw it out, you're going to need it tomorrow.
And you got to go buy a new one.
Yep, that's right. All those things. But the thing you want to do is keep in mind, that's one of those things you want to keep the end result in mind. What will it look like?
Oh, yeah.
After you do this? You don't want to look at the present chore. You want to look at the finished, completed project.
Right. And when I do a project like that, I just take a section and that's what I focus on. Just that little section, not the entire thing. Just, okay, I've got to get the 6 boxes here sorted, trashed, keep, give away, boom, done. And that helps me so much. And that's when a spade becomes a spade, Jim.
Oh.
Speak plainly, okay? Speak plainly. But this is kind of cool. It might be thought that this derives from the derogatory use of the slang term spade, meaning, Negro and African American,
Mm-hmm.
originating in the 20th century. The view of it as derogatory might also be thought to be supported by this piece from John Trapp's Mellification or Merrill of the Many Good Authors of 1647.
Hmm.
Gods shall not spare to call a spade, a niggard a niggard.
Mm-hmm.
His use of niggard is difficult to interpret. The word had
Mm-hmm.
several meanings in the 17th century.
Mm-hmm.
It could be used to mean a miser, which is more common usage today, or general term of abuse, a lout, a barbarian. The
Mm-hmm.
word was also used as the name of fire bricks in gates.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, right. So there's lots and lots of,
Mm-hmm.
uses on it. An earlier expression of the notation in different form to that which we now use comes from Nicholas Udall's. Um, oh Lord, some of these names are really hard to read, folks. I apologize
I understand that.
right off the top because I'm not sure my tongue can quite roll like that, but we're going to try.
They got eight vowels and 29 syllables.
Right. Apothegms of Eramis,
Mm-hmm.
translated in 1542. So that goes back a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's a new one. I
Mm-hmm.
would not have thought that.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the phrase barking mad?
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
Oh, this one here has got a very interesting origin. We know that probably the meaning that comes to everyone's mind is a reference to a rabid dog because they're barking in their madness.
Wow.
But the more interesting tale that's less likely known is that barking mad originated from East London suburb of Barking, Barking, where there was an asylum for the insane during the medieval period, and they referred to them as the insane as being mad. So the mad people were sent to Barking. So that's how the Barking mad actually came together. Can you believe that?
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh.
Wow. Well, what about
That's
Jim?
crazy. Insane, man. You didn't think I'd catch that, did you?
He's sharp today, folks. He's sharp. I kind of tried to put it in there real nonchalantly, too.
Yeah. You're nuts if you think I'm going to buy that,
Okay, but that's cheap at half the price, Jim.
I know it.
You're right. So
Mm-hmm.
the meaning of that is of uncertain meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the origin, it goes on to say cheap prices. Price is a numerical measure and as such can be high or low, but it can't be cheap any more than it can be green or pro-communist. Likewise, a phrase can be heard in the most weather forecasts. Hot temperatures. No, again, temperature can only be high or low, but it can't be hot. There's fast speeds, and okay, they're saying they're going to get off this, but cheap at half the price has joined the list of English phrases that don't convey any useful literal meaning, but which are used in their entirety rather than being reflected on word by word. Other examples that you can make literal sense is put your best foot forward, head over heels, and more recently, I could care less. Kind of interesting. Kind of interesting.
Have you ever heard the phrase that the female species is more deadly than the male?
You have to ask that question?
I'm asking in a nice way.
Hell hath no fury like a scorned woman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're watching a show on, I think it's on Hulu, Murderous Women. Oh
Oh, okay.
my goodness. Whew.
Yeah.
14 seasons of those things. We ain't watch all 14 of them. We've seen a few of them kind of like, woo, you know.
Yeah. Some of them were
But
ruthless.
14 seasons of, murderous women. Oh my goodness gracious. And, well, guys can be just as bad too. I mean, it's just, but the murderous women, that has a ring to it. Murderous guys, I take them out and shoot them.
Right.
But what's really interesting is that the female of the species is more deadly than the male, and they refer to the black widow spider.
Hmm.
But this is now a famous phrase. It's a line from the Jungle Book from the author Rudyard
Rudyard Kipling.
Kipling. Yeah. The female of the species. This was printed back and published in 1911. So that's where that came from. Oh, gosh, Donna. Sometimes I just can't talk because you know what I've got in my throat? Got
Frog.
a frog in my throat. Yeah.
Got a frog in your throat.
hmm
Hmm.
The earliest cure and use for this name for a sore throat was actually supposed to be a cure. The earliest use of frog in your throat was supposed to be a cure. In the Stevens Point Journal in November of 1894, the Taylor brothers advertised a medicine called frog in the throat that will cure hoarseness for only 10 cents a box. It doesn't go into saying what was in that box.
Oh, I can only imagine back in those days.
No kidding. Even back
Probably
in,
opium or something.
yeah, because even in our day, I mean, we look at some of the cough syrups. There was a cough syrup my mother believed in called Hadacol, Hadacol. Goodness gracious, that stuff was about 25% alcohol,
Hmm. Well,
and
look at Coca-Cola. When it
yeah,
originally started out, it had cocaine in it, for heaven's sake.
yeah, and then they put it on a diet.
Well, how about the cleanliness is next to godliness?
Oh, I used to think that was scripture because my mother said that all the time. Goodness gracious.
Well, it came, says here, um, back in, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says
Right.
that the first expression of the idea behind the proverb is found in the writings of the great English scientist and philosopher Sir Francis Bacon. In
Uh-huh.
Advancement of Learning 1605, he wrote, "Cleanliness of body was ever esteemed to proceed from a due reverence to God, to society, and to ourselves."
Mm.
So it goes on to say that it's cleanliness is next to godliness is also purity of body, purity of soul,
Yeah, purity
and
of mind. Yeah.
also your house. It's
Yeah.
referred to in that way.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, because my mother used that phrase a lot, cleanliness next to godliness. And I thought it was scripture. I mean, what did I know? It's
Mother
one of those,
still knows best.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You ever hear that song, Fools Rush In, where wise men fear to tread or whatever? This is a shortened line from the English poet Alexander Pope, an essay on criticism in 1709. For fools rush in where angels fear to tread. The fools in question are literary critics, although fool did not have such a negative connotation back in the 18th century. But that came from an essay on criticism in 1709 by Alexander Pope. That's where that came from.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Well, the chip off the old block,
Oh, yeah, we know what that means, don't we?
right? That a person or thing that derives from the source of parentage. You're just like your father, you're just like your mother, whatever that
Yep.
might be, right? But the origin, there's three variants of this form. The earlier form of this phrase is chip off the same block. The block
Okay.
in question may have been stone or wood. It dates back to at least 1621. And then it appears in that form in Bishop of Lincoln, Robert Sanderson's sermons. I am not a child of the same Adam, a chip off the same block with him. So it's interchangeable, is what they're saying, that it's interchangeable. Um, and let's see, it's stayed off rather, it is stayed of rather than off until the 19th century. In Chip Off the Old Block, it is the parent, especially the father, that is being called the old block. Okay.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I tell you that. It's amazing. And, you know, there's an old saying too, fly by the seat of your
Your
pants.
pants. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Do you know where that come from?
I have no clue.
Okay, it's actually an aviation term. It emerged in 1938 in the U.S. newspapers to describe a pilot by the name of Douglas Corrigan in his perilous flight from the U.S. to Ireland. Now, Corrigan was he walked to the beat of his own drum. He really didn't care because he had an unauthorized transatlantic flight and was due to a navigational error, he was caught up in a heavy cloud cover that obscured landmarks and low light conditions, causing him to misread his compass. And he was just flying in the blind. So he was literally flying by the seat of his pants.
Interesting.
And that's where that comes from, flying by the seat of your pants. And because he was just, like I said, he just, he walked to the beat of his own drum. He didn't take
Right.
proper preparation seriously. He just thought, hey, all I got to do is get in that airplane and
Fly
go.
it.
I'm good. Yeah. I mean,
Nothing out there.
if I got an airplane and I got a engine that's working, I got a compass. So what's your problem?
Right. Right. Well, how about this? Man, that was a cliffhanger.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. So, a story and situation in which there's a lot of suspense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the origin of this, though, is a little bit different. It is entered in the language as a description of a various short melodramatic serial films which Hollywood produced in 1914 onward.
Mm-hmm.
The best known of these are the Perils of Pauline and the Exploits of
Oh,
Elaine,
yeah.
right? So it goes on. Uh, the heroine is less left facing certain death at the end of one film in a series, tied to railroad tracks, hanging from a cliff by her
Mm.
fingernails, only to be saved at the beginning of the next one.
Yeah.
So these go back, like 1936 ish.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Have you ever heard you don't beat a dead horse or flogging a dead horse or something like that?
Yes. Yes.
Ironically, it dates back to the 17th century. A dead horse was a term for work which a person had been paid for in advance and already spent, and the person did not do the job.
Oh,
How many times I got caught up into that? And I got caught up into that just a few years ago with a guy. He was doing some painting at my house and he liked it a little bit. And he says, Can I? It was a weekend. He says, Can I get paid the rest now because I need to buy groceries for my family and my baby needs this and my baby needs that. And so rather than stick to my guns and say, well, I'll pay you when you get, when you finish. And I guess I could have gave him partial or half of it or whatever. But anyway, I paid him in full.
and he
And
never
that was
gets
the
that.
last time I saw him. He wouldn't even take my phone call after that.
That's a scoundrel.
Yeah. His wife answered his phone and I told her the reason I was calling. And she says, well, I don't have anything to say or do about it. I said, well, you benefited from it. Come on. I mean, what's
Right.
fair is square. But people who do things like that, there's a moral to that story. Uh, when that happens to you, just love them and let them go. Okay.
Right. Right.
He's the cheapest person I ever bought. I'll say that because
Right.
that's exactly what you do. You buy they don't realize it, but they sell themselves. In this particular case, I think it was about $150, whatever it might have been. But anyway, this will cost them more than $150 in the
Oh yeah.
future.
Oh yeah.
So be careful when you give your word. You keep your word. And if you can't, you give a bona fide reason, not a lame duck excuse. And you ask, okay, how can I be good on this? How can I make
Right.
this right? That's important in life.
Right. Well,
Because if you don't, you're going to shortchange yourself, cheat yourself, and you will pay a much higher price.
and your name becomes mud.
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't
Yeah, we
we?
did. We did. And and they're a different kettle of fish.
Oh, yeah. She's just trying to see if I'm awake over here.
That was awesome. Oh, I love that.
I mean, she slipped that in there so smooth. It
Jim,
didn't
it
even
was
make a ripple in the
right. It was
water.
like fishing for a big German brown.
Yep, yep, yep.
But a different kettle of fish, is an alternative, it's something different altogether. The origin, a different kettle of fish, is the expression means a mess or a muddle. Okay. And more about the source of a kettle of fish. There's so many things in here with it, but it says a pretty kettle of fish. The different variant is much later than the original petty form, from which it clearly derives, despite the two phrases have two different meanings. So, but the expression dates from the late 19th century and was found most commonly in Scotland and in north of England, where fish kettles were and still are quite commonplace.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And Donna, we got time for one more, and I'm going to throw one out there.
I wish you would, Jim.
And this is just about the end of the show anyway, so I'm going to get the sack. That expression when someone says they got the sack, what that means, where the origin of it means, is that it's a slang term for being fired. It originates all the way back into France, and it alludes to tradesmen that they were fired from their job or fired from working on this project, and they would take their bag or their sack of tools with them when they got dismissed from employment. So they got their sack and got out of there. So that's where that term came from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I know we're getting close and we got to wrap up here in just a few minutes. But I want to take the moment on behalf of Jim and myself. If you are out there and have any really uncommon, interesting sayings that your family uses as said in the past, please be sure to email us at inspiration@e360tv.com. We would love to honor you and to talk about what that is.
And we also want to be mindful of the fact that Donna and I are very grateful for you folks. It's been, watching the show and all that made us very popular because we got invited to have our own Roku app and Amazon Fire app. And this journey we've all been on together has really helped us to be able to help other people. And we take that journey very seriously because being a blessing to others is why we are here on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
We're not here for money. We're not here for things. We're not here for fame. We're not here for fortune. For those folks of you that you're looking for fame, fortune, or things, you're watching the wrong show. And I mean that in a nice way because it's all about how can we bless others, because when you bless others, you're going to get blessed yourself.
Tenfold.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be back tomorrow. And the next week, of course, going to talk about the roaring 20s because I bet we're going to cover something in there that just might ignite the imagination of someone go,
Right.
Because it's amazing some of the inventions came out of the 20s. We're going to be covering those next week.
Absolutely.
Well, Donna, our time is gone. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Donna and I, we hope that you make sure you love yourself first, and then you can love others. Make sure you forgive yourself. But we hope that you and your loved ones are blessed and happy and healthy in all areas of your life. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.
Bye.